Hello, everybody. This is Kate Kelly with Monarch Housing Associates. I wanted to thank you all for joining us for this afternoon's webinar. Just a few housekeeping notes. You are all currently in the listen-only mode, but we do have a mechanism. If you look over at it's probably on the right hand of your screen, the GoToWebinar control panel, which you should see. There is a little box for questions where you can either type in questions, and if you look down a little further, there is a chat screen where you can type a message. So either way is a good way to get questions to us, but we probably will not stop to answer questions until after we are done with the presentation, unless it's something pressing that we feel like we should address right away. But once again, thank you to everyone for joining us. This is the NJCounts 2018 webinar on planning your local outreach to communicate with the press. And the agenda we're going to go over today will include some general press tips, social media, working with social media, press contacts, what the press will want, quotes, press materials, and then we'll take questions and share our contact information. I'm very pleased today to be joined by, by Beth Joseph, who's the Director of Communications and Donor Relations at Jewish Family Services of Atlantic and Cape May County. Beth has had a great deal of experience working with the press around NJCounts. So a little later on in the webinar, she's going to share her perspective on what she has found to work well. For those of you who just joined the webinar, I see that a few more people joined us. Just a reminder that you are in the listen-only mode, but there is an area where you can ask questions and also chat with us if you have questions. So if something comes up that isn't clear to you, you have something you want to add, please use either the question or the chat tool to do that. And we will get back to you with your questions or comments at the end of the webinar. So I just wanted to start by going over some general tips for speaking with the press. And, first too, I should thank all of you for being willing to be a local press contact for your local point in time count. I know for many of you, this is above and beyond what you usually do in your regular work days. So we really appreciate you making yourself available and being available to speak with the press. Just some goals to keep in mind, which some of you may already know through your work with reporters, is that they really are your friends. And this is a story, the count of the homeless, that reporters want to report on. You're doing something good that is valued and motivated by good intentions. The count is a very good thing to be doing. So you should never feel that you have to be defensive. The reporters are always going to include the other side of the story, so you should tell yours. For a case like this, the NJCounts 2018 is nothing controversial, but you should feel free to get in your messages about why your county and the volunteers, organizations, agencies coordinating the local count, why they're doing the count. So it's to get, whether that, let me just get back to my screen. Whether that is, to get more accurate data, it can be for a variety of reasons. Get more accurate data, to get a better sense of what the needs are of the homeless. You should just keep those reasons in mind when you're talking to the press. You should know that your goal in talking to the press is to help forward the efforts to ending homelessness in your community through good public policy and developing relationships with members of the press. So whenever you're talking to the press about NJCounts 2018 or anything else related to ending homelessness, you should feel free to put a plug in for the good work that your colleagues are doing to end homelessness in your community. A quick reminder that reporters are your friends, but you are not their friends. So when they come out to report on the story, you can offer them a cup of coffee, but I wouldn't offer them any more in terms of food or drink than that. You just want to keep the relationship friendly, but not, overly friendly. There are a lot of what some might call do-gooders, people working, very hard and doing good work to help those who are less fortunate, but you want to distinguish yourself those of you or your colleagues involved with NJCounts2018, that you're different, that you really are working towards a solution of on the goal of ending homelessness and how you're doing this. So, make sure that the arguments for your giving for why it's so important to end homelessness, the examples you're doing make sense, and that they really show the good work you're doing in the best way that you can. This is a good time, if you don't already know them, to get to know the journalists covering the issue of ending homelessness. It's important for everyone, the reporters, to know who covers. It's important for the reporters to know who the local experts are. Usually you and the other folks coordinating the count are the local experts on ending homelessness. But it's also good for you to know who is covering homelessness or housing or real estate or any related issues at local news outlets, and be able to, if you don't already have a relationship, use the count to build a relationship and then move forward from there. Now, it's a very quick changing media market, and unfortunately many news outlets at this time are shrinking staff. So you may find from year to year with NJCounts 2018 this year and other events that you do around the year around ending homelessness or other outreach you do in the media, that the reporter contacts are changing. So it is important just to stay up to date on who's currently covering the issue of homelessness in your community. It's important that you give journalists any information they need, so important facts, but not too many. So you probably want to have on hand the statistics around what NJCounts 2017 found in your community, and also just some quick bullets about the best practices being used in your community to end homelessness. Also, kind of going hand in hand with the shrinking media market, reporters are often more than ever pressed for time in filing a story and meeting deadlines. So if you have a few quotes either from you or from volunteers, staff at agencies going out and conducting the count, even a quote from someone who was formerly homeless and is now living in housing, if you have 1, 2, 3 quotes that you want to share with the press, typed up with names of who to attribute them to and contact information, that's always really appreciated, and I think you'll find that those quotes end up showing up in your story, in the news story, the reporting, and it's a great way for you to get your message out there. And lastly, and I think it's always a good reminder, but I don't think it's a potential problem in this case, is that you always want to tell the whole truth about why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and make sure you're answering their questions truthfully and you're giving them accurate information. So now that we've gone over those tips, excuse me, I think it's important to keep in mind what your goal is reaching out to the press. Do you want to draw more attention around the plight of the homeless in your community? Do you want to make the general public and reporters aware of what the goals are for ending homelessness and how you're doing with working towards meeting those? And really just think about what your key messages are around ending homelessness, and use NJCounts as a way to get those messages out there. So now I'm going to turn it over to Beth, who's going to share just her perspective from working with a more local agency around working with the press on NJCounts. And then when Beth is done, I'll pick it back up with some additional slides. Beth?
Okay, thank you so much for having me today. And thank you for everybody who is doing the work and helping get exposure for what we're all trying to do, which is end homelessness in New Jersey. So I guess really what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of my experience working with the media, but also working specifically with this count. A couple things I do ahead of time is I try and pre-schedule the media interviews. I try and do them back to back if possible, so that whoever the representative is that I'm using as my spokesperson that day, they're best using their time. So I typically try to schedule the media and photographer together. Sometimes that doesn't happen. And I usually try to shoot for after 10 a.m. because then we typically have our morning numbers in. So those midnight to 8 a.m. numbers are usually calculated by 10 a.m. So I can kind of give a snapshot of what we're seeing this year in comparison to last year. So make sure you have last year's numbers with you, because they probably will ask. And it's a good thing to say, at this, 8 hours in last year, we had seen this amount of people, we're seeing this amount. Sometimes we can make an assumption as to how the weather or the conditions may affect why we're seeing those numbers. I know we had one year where it was really, really rainy. So we actually saw more people because of the rain, because they were in those places that we were going. Whoever the point person is, I make sure they have their business card on them. So whoever my interview person is at our agency, we use the person that coordinates the event. I make sure she has probably about 5 or 6 business cards, so she can be giving them to both the photographer and the reporter. Same with TV. A lot of times the reporter is different than the CG person. So making sure that they both have accurate titles and spelling is sometimes difficult. And it's always the first question that they ask, what's your name and your title and how do you spell it? So being able to really quickly hand the card shows that you're really prepared. I also typically try to have one either vendor or other provider other than JFS that's a reputable partner that can stand by if they're asking for a second interview. A lot of times by having that second person, it keeps them from trying to speak directly with the clientele, which can oftentimes be a little difficult. They may just be there to be seeking assistance and not necessarily want to be speaking or be seen by the media. So having that 1 or 2 really reputable point people has really helped. If I didn't say it, having the press release that Monarch sends out ahead of time to hand to them as an easy reference is always important. And then the other thing is I always talk to both the reporter and the photographer about client privacy. I talk about different ways to take pictures, whether you're taking it from the back or taking it from the side or taking a close-up of their hands interacting, the products that we're giving away. We have probably 20 vendors inside our Salvation Army. So, getting close-ups of coats being tried on or shoes being tried on, and really looking at that, because we don't want to deter the people that are coming and seeking assistance and filling out our surveys from coming because they feel uncomfortable that the media is there. So I really do work with the media to make sure everybody feels comfortable there. The media, that they're getting their story, and that those seeking assistance are getting that assistance and not being put in the situation that makes them feel like they're going to be identified when they don't want to be. Ask for questions ahead of time. When you're scheduling your interview, I always ask them, hey, if you have a list of questions, let us know ahead so we can be properly prepared to answer them. A lot of times I'll kind of say like, oh, that way we can get statistics for you. And one of the great things is we have a lot of statistics on homelessness in our county and in our state. So asking those questions ahead, and that way, if your point person, whether it's you or somebody else, may not feel so comfortable on the topic, you've had some time to prep on it. And it's actually shocking, 9 times out of 10, they will send me questions. That's probably the only stuff leading into it. The only thing I would say following it is don't forget to use your press coverage to further your mission. We're spending the time, we're doing these interviews. Don't forget to share it and tell people and make people aware of what you're doing, because it comes some credibility when it's coming from another agency, when it's coming from a print source, when it's coming from a TV outlet. So don't forget to share that. Send a press release out. Send it to your board. Send it to anybody that's willing to read it, because a lot of times we get so caught up in doing the interview and having the actual day that the after fact sometimes gets lost. And that's just as important as the interview itself. So that's probably where I am. I will say we are in Atlantic and Kane counties, so we have about 3 media outlets in our region, so it's not a lot to juggle. So I don't know how relevant that is to everybody else's region. And, I have formed these relationships, so it might be a little easier at times to get a little more from your media.
That's great. Thank you, Beth. We really,
no problem. Thank
really
you.
appreciate your perspective. And Beth, I think you're going to stay on the call, right?
Yes,
the webinar.
absolutely.
So if there are questions at the end. Okay, wonderful. Yes. Thanks. So building on the very helpful perspective that Beth shared with us, a way to promote or get out the message out to the public, the good work that's being done through NJCounts 2018 and why it's being done is to use social media. So you may have seen in the emails that have been going out so far and on these webinar slides, we use the hashtag, it's hashtag in caps NJCounts and then a space in the year. We do that so that from year to year we can keep using the NJCounts hashtag and then just change the year. This slide, and we will be sending out a PDF of the slides after the webinar, but this slide has links to the following the hashtag on Facebook, Facebook video, and Twitter. So you can click on those links and see in the past how the hashtag was used either by agencies, volunteers conducting the count, or by reporters reporting on the count. I think if you are posting about anything related to NJCounts, it's very important to use the hashtag. Reporters may do a quick hashtag search on most likely Twitter, but maybe on Facebook. So whether you're posting pictures, posting a call for volunteers, anything related to NJCounts, I just encourage you to use the hashtag because it is a way that reporters sometimes do some quick research on a story. And the more the hashtag is used, the more it will become widely recognized, and it's just a great way for you to be able to post from your own agency's perspective anything related to the NJCounts 2018. So something to think about when thinking about who your press contacts are. They may be the traditional papers that are in your region that typically cover local stories. So there's newspapers, there's now online media. So if you have patch outlets or tap into sites, we've found that those reporters are very happy to cover the story. They tend to use the press releases and press advisories that we send out almost verbatim. So, we'll send those to our local, where we have them, the patch and tap into contacts. But if you have them, you should absolutely feel free to send out our press release with your local flavor, personalization to it, to your local contacts. Television, NJTV has covered the issue lately, but there are also, the network affiliates out of Philadelphia and New York City. So if you're close to those areas, you may want to reach out to those TV reporters, or they may reach out to you. Radio, NJ101.5 typically covers the story. I know in Cranford, our office is in Cranford, there's a Cranford radio, which sometimes covers related stories. So think about any local radio outlets that you work with, public radio stations and whatnot. This NJ Connects 2018 in the story is a great way to connect the press to local agencies working to end homelessness. So when you are sending out the press release, as Beth talked about, contacts within agencies besides Jewish Family Services the day of, you could also send out with the press advisory and the press release a list of 1 or 2 individuals from different agencies and organizations who are willing to speak with the press. And if your organization has clients, consumers, individuals or families experiencing homelessness, or the formerly homeless that are willing to speak with the press, that is sometimes a great way to get around the issue of that Beth talked about, of reporters wanting to speak to people the day of the event. So, and I'd be happy to talk more about this later, but you could sort of line up 1 or 2 or 3 individuals and families, get a quote from them, make sure they're comfortable sharing at least their first name with the press, and you could include those quotes in your local outreach to the press. That way the press can cover the more personal side of people's lived experience of homelessness, but again, avoid the press deterring anyone from seeking services during the count, or impacting anyone who might have or interfering with any issues people may have with confidentiality. Moving on to the next slide, something to think about what details the press will want and need to know. So they will, sorry, my slides are going all over. There we go. They will want to know the logistics of the local count. So when is your community going out and doing a street count? How and when are the shelter counts taking place? Thinking about why, and just to back up, if there's a Project Homeless Connect event in your community, you probably want to let them know about that, because that's often a good event where you can interact with the press. Talk to the press about why the local count is being conducted. We all know there's a HUD mandate, but what reasons does your community see for doing the count beyond that it's required by HUD? Who is counting locally? What agencies and volunteers are going out? What factors do you expect to impact the count? Is it, we can't predict what the weather will be on January 24th, but is it an extremely cold night or a rainy night, or a rainy day or night, as Beth talked about, where folks are more apt to seek shelters, so you think you'll see higher sheltered numbers, or you'll be able to count people at a code blue shelter? Are there any statewide or local factors contributing, trends that you're seeing contributing to homelessness? I know in the past, when the change in chronic homelessness definition happened, that impacted some counts. Do you see, as another example, increased participation from youth providers this year, which may bump up your youth count? The same could apply to veterans. What are there any trends that you have in your community, or you're seeing in community, that you think will impact the account, or anything that will be different this year for the the day of the count? And then just kind of going back to the slide I was talking about earlier, and also from Beth's comments, thinking about who could be interviewed locally. So that's what the press may want and need to know. Who are the providers, and are there any individuals with experience with homelessness? Not necessarily that will be counted that day. They may already be housed, but would they be willing to talk to the press? So we are working on a press advisory that we will hope to get to you by either this Wednesday, January 10th, or at the latest Thursday, January 11th. The press advisory is really just something we send to our press contacts. It's a one-pager with the who, what, where, and when about that the count is happening. It allows, especially if they're newer reporters, to get the date and time of the count on their schedule, on their calendars, maybe talk to their editors, producers about it. We will send with the press advisory a list of the press contacts that we have finalized to date. So when we will send the press advisory out to our contacts with the list of you all as press contacts. I'll make sure that you also get a copy of it so you can see what we're sending out. You can feel free to forward our press advisory, but I also strongly encourage you to edit it as you see fit to include any information about your local count, Project Homeless Connect events, whatever may help you with your efforts. And then the press release will be more detailed, maybe 2 pages long. That will have quotes from Monarch staff about why the count is being done, why it's being coordinated on a statewide level. We usually get quotes from a few folks around the state, maybe from someone from HUD giving their perspective. That will most likely go out a few days before the count. So in this case, on January 22nd, and then we'll send it out again the day of the count. And again, we'll get the press advisory to you. We'll make sure you get it in the Word version, just as you're getting the press advisory, so that you can make some edits and include your local information in that. When we send out the press release, we like to send out a few more resources for the press, quotes about NJCounts. We may get a lot more quotes than we need from folks around the state about NJCounts that will fit in our press release. So we may have a second document of quotes. If your county, one of the agencies or organizations you work with would like to share a quote about NJCounts and why it's so important that it's being done in your community and you want to email that to me, I'd be more than happy to include the local perspective in this second sheet with quotes about NJCounts. So I just encourage you to think about that as a way to get in more of the statewide media push, statewide media outreach, get the message out about why your county is participating. We usually do a fact sheet about the best practices in ending homelessness. We do a fact sheet about homelessness in New Jersey that includes a summary of the key findings in NJCounts 2017. And then we do a frequently asked question page, which oftentimes includes the specifics about why HUD requires the count. But those are all materials. You will get those along with your press release, and you should feel free to edit them and use them as widely as you'd like. I talked a little bit about quotes before. Reporters like to use quotes, and we find more and more that reporters are using our quotes, especially if they really are tight for time on covering the story. You should think about who in your community you would want to be giving quotes, whether it's good to get a quote from a county executive, maybe from a local elected official, folks with the agencies heading up the count. I think having a few, 2, 3, 4 quotes prepared and ready to go is always helpful. Again, you can share these quotes with me and I can include them in our statewide media package. Examples of quotes that seem to work well are, for example, Mercer County participates in NJCounts because NJCounts data helps us do this. And lastly, we hope that the NJCounts 2018 results will, ... You can use these if you ask someone for a quote, but they need a little prompting on what makes a good quote. You could feel free to use those kind of quote starters. So at this point, just a reminder, you should feel free to either message us a question through chat or ask a question. One last thought on something you can do to make your local press outreach successful. If you have press contacts in the Cory Booker and Senator Booker and Senator Menendez's offices, or press contacts in the congressional offices that represent your county, you should feel free to send them materials about the count, press materials about the count. We send them that. Congress will be on recess during the time period January 24th of this year's count. So we have been reaching out to the congressional delegation, letting them know that. We're hoping some members would at the minimum be able to stop by a Homeless Connect event in their district. But if you have relationships with the local congressional offices, we encourage you to reach out to them as well. At this point, I'm going to just ask anyone at all who may have a question to share that question with us. Okay, it doesn't look like at this time there are questions, but this webinar is being recorded, so we will send out a recording of it, especially to folks who last minute weren't able to join us. And if you can think of any questions after the call that you'd like to ask us, we hope that you will, you can email me, and if it's a question for Beth, you can email me and I'll be sure to get that question to her. My contact information is here on this slide, and you can reach me by email or cell or my office phone number, whatever is easiest for you. And I just want to include, again, we really appreciate you taking the time to be the local press contact, to be on this call, and all that you do to help make NJCounts 2018 a success, and that getting the word out about the good work being done to end homelessness in your community. Did you think of anything else, Beth, you'd like to add now that I've...
I think you covered it pretty nicely.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you, too, to Beth for making the time to join us. And we'll be in touch with the press materials, but please reach out to me if you have any questions in the meantime. Thank you.